You can't hear me. Hey guys, thank you everybody for coming this evening. Just gonna hang out, sew some. I have lots of work to do on a lot of things, but I'm also home with my kids, so you're gonna hear lots of background noise and just the crazy. They get to go back to school tomorrow, and I'm super excited about that. So we're gonna give people just a couple more minutes to show up. I'm gonna make sure that my video is working correctly, and we will go from there. All right, if you want to just throw a thumbs up there if you can hear me and see me. I'm going to try to watch for comments and just get some things done. I'm going to switch this so you can see what I'm working on. All right. Ooh, why is that camera not up to date? This is why I was doing this. There's a few things in my new studio. There we go. But just, oh, and that one works too, that are just giving me some trouble. So, for those of you who do not know, I finished this first block. We walked through this tutorial together. I actually did it twice. I did it once to practice and then once to show you all. So I have two of those very first blocks done, and I showed you the difference between keeping this piece as one piece and then doing it as two pieces. And that just determined whether or not you had to do a Y seam or not. There are definitely blocks in this project where you have no choice but to do a Y seam, but this was one of the ones that we had a choice. Since then, my family found out about 2 to 3 weeks after that video, as I was prepping for the next ones, that we were relocating. So we used to live in Florida, and we made the decision as a family to relocate to the Western New York area. It was for my job, so and it was quick. So I took the job the last week of June, and I had to be on site for the new job this basically the third week of July. So it was a very fast move, and I have not gotten caught up on life since then. Took about 3 months to get my new sewing studio set up, and it's still a mess in here. You can sort of see the mess behind me. Little tight quarters, but I'm grateful for the space. And my husband and I work at least a little bit every time he's home on finding ways to make it more space effective for us. So it's a constantly moving target. So it looks like I have cut the pieces for block 3, 3, and 3, 2, I believe. I cut these while I was at my my niece's house one day when I was bored. So, and And then these look like the pieces for block 2-1. And then I know I also have some of the pieces cut for 7-1. So I'm going to go start off easy and go with this month, which is 3, 2, and 3, 3. And it says to make 2. So any of the things you see on my video today that you like, I can post links to that in the comments to the video after we're done. And also know that all of my normal sewing equipment is still all over the place. So I I don't know where my seam roller is, which is like my favorite tool to use for this project, and I haven't the foggiest where it is. So I will be using an iron, which I should probably turn on and get warm. You won't be able to see the iron on the camera, unfortunately. I do know this video can be somewhat choppy. We're working on new streaming equipment or a hard Ethernet line for my basement. So, okay. All right, so we're just gonna set these pieces aside. And I did get a new sewing machine as well, which is very exciting. And so this will be my first adventure with this project on that machine. For those of you not aware, I taught this in the last video, but you kind of have two options with this project. You can either take the paper pieces and use an add a quarter ruler and outline from the paper pieces the 1/4 inch seams in addition to the paper, or you can, and I can show you that, or you can use the templates that they sell with the pattern, and then you either, then you have to sew a 3/8 inch seam. So for the sake of simplicity and to get these special corner cuts, I chose to use the templates that it came with. But I do a ton of foundation paper piecing, so I live with my add a quarter ruler in my hand. It's even right here on my table. So if you wanted to do that, you would simply take your piece of fabric. If you're, let's say you're going to cut this little hexagon out, you find a piece of scrap here. You would take your piece of fabric, you would move the things you don't want to cut. Take your piece of fabric, you take the paper template that came with the project kit. This is not ironed, I apologize for that. And then you could just, I would recommend using like a repositionable glue on the paper. I have lots of it in my house, again, as a foundation paper piecer. This is just, it says re-stickable glue. So you would just take and put a little bit on here. Doesn't take a lot, and if you let it dry, you can literally peel this off and put it back on fabric a million times. Sorry if it doesn't look like I'm looking at the camera. I'm actually watching my computer screen for comments and people to join in. That's not where my current webcam is. So let's see. All right, so you would take this. This is now dry. You can stick this down just like this. And then you could take, hold on a second, let me turn down the volume over here. You just take this. I like to use the little, this little cutter. And you just cut all the way around. This can use a little bit more fabric because it you have to sort of overcut a little bit. So you just line this up, and this has, those of you not familiar with an add a quarter ruler, this has a bit of a like lip on it. So that's what you put your paper right up against. And because of that restickable glue, this is not sliding around on me at all. So then you can just cut. This is not ideal. I should be using my spinny little table right here, because I am definitely right-handed. And last one would be like this. So that's one way to cut these, and this will give you a 1/4 inch seam. So then you can use a standard 1/4 inch seam to sew it. What this doesn't do is do the little notched corners. And there are ways to get those as well, but the whole point for me of digging into the idea of machine piecing this project was to figure out how to make it faster and simpler. And I think the more steps you get to try to replicate the paper or a regular piecing environment, the more difficult it becomes. So I would just do it this way and then not have the smart cut corners if I wanted to do a 1/4 inch seam. I actually prefer to just sew with a 3/8 inch seam. So I use the templates that came with the project. And as you can see, if I set this right over top of the template, it's 1/8 of an inch too small all the way around, which just again shows you that you have to cut your seam that much bigger. You have to sew your seam a little bit bigger if you're going to use the plastic acrylic templates that you could purchase along with this project. I used that the glitter tape a lot of people use just so you can see the edges, otherwise it's very clear and difficult to see. And this is also glitter, so it gets a little, it doesn't quite, I mean it's not perfect, but it definitely doesn't slide as much as it would without the tape. So that is how you would do it with a 3/8 inch seam. I am not using a 3/8 inch seam, so what I have done over here is I've actually set up this guard for me is at 3/8, and so I just have a regular foot that I bumped on my machine, and I sew with this little guard on. There it is. Like I said, I got a new machine a couple of months ago, and I'm still sort of learning my way around it. So I'm going to start with this piece that I was lining up before we started to talk about cutting. And I would recommend highly with these pieces, especially that you use a leader and an ender, just so that you don't have the bunching of the fabric underneath. So I'm just looking for a piece of scrap fabric to use as a leader. Sorry, you don't really need an ender, but you definitely need a leader. So I'm just going to throw this down. I need to tell my machine what foot I'm using or it's going to get angry at me. This is a Bernina 770, the Cafe edition. I have been a Baby Lock and Brother girl through and through, and I still very much love those machines, but some of the quilting events that I've been attending use Berninas, and so I wanted to expand my knowledge on the Bernina so that I could effectively use their machines when I was there. All right, so that's done, and then I actually like to use my knee lift, but because I'm turning around so much, I'm afraid I'm going to knock it off. So I also shorten my stitch length to at least a 2, just to keep the corners crisp, especially when you're, I'm going to need my knee lift, especially when you are trying to do Y seams. It's important to have a short stitch length. So we're just going to sew right on this with my fabric up against the guard here. And it should go, and then I just program my machine to cut my thread. And it should go right through, see if you can see this, right through the points. It's hard for you to see because my fabric is very white. I didn't quite get that one lined up very good. So another little tool that I like, especially if you're going to use, ooh, bumping the table. If you're going to use a shorter stitch length, is this little guy. It's an eyebrow shaver. And this helps to, you can get like 50,000 of them on Amazon for like $3. And it just helps so I don't have to try to stick a seam ripper in this tiny little spot here, poke holes in my fabric. If I just simply open this up, I'm doing this because I didn't quite get it lined up right. Too much talking, not enough sewing. But you just go in here and you can just like barely clip and pull and clip, pull. I don't pull too hard. I don't stretch the fabric, especially this, because it's many times cut on the bias for these shapes. But just pull, trim, pull and trim. It depends on the kind of eyebrow shaver you get. Some of them are serrated and some of them are not. These are serrated. I have a billion of these. The customers who, I do have a small shop that I run out of my house and online. And the customers who purchase the Queen of Diamonds kit from me at some point have gotten an eyebrow shaver as a little goodie in their bag, which is a fun little tool to have in your box. So we're gonna try that again. The other thing you can do, again, as a foundation paper piece, I always have glue. This is just with sew line glue. Comes in several colors, dries clear. You could put just a touch of it on here, and this will help you line it up and make it stay. So if you're like me and you're working on a tabletop that your machine is not on, just press right where that glue was. It won't shift on you when you spin around. All right, so try that one more time. My little leader piece, this will have a million pieces of thread hanging off of it when I'm done. There's the right button. All right, and another helpful tip that I loved going to like retreats and taking classes so I can learn all the tips and tricks for things that make people's sewing better. And one of the things that I learned in a class somewhere was, sorry, I'm fighting a cord on the floor. Setting your speed on your machine so that with the pedal all the way to the floor, it won't go faster than you want to be going, because then you don't have to worry about being halfway down or accidentally stomping it. And then everything else is gravy at that point. You don't have to, everything else is slower, so you won't ever go faster than you're comfortable with. I'm going to press these just over, I believe. Let me teach you another trick I learned from someone. Okay, so this is just my book where you can see what I'm working on. This is an acorn pressing pen. I actually have some of them in stock in my shop. I just don't have them listed on my website yet. Most local quilt stores will carry it. 99% sure you can get it on Amazon. I do not recommend going with anything but the name brand. It's a starch pen, so it's a pen that's got a little starch in it. You just put a line of it here, and then when I press this open, it is going to lay super duper flat. This is as good as my little rolling tool, and even better if you can do both. But like I said, in the move, everything got lost. I can't find anything. I was missing a camera today before this event, so I have no idea where my rolling tool is. I'm sure it'll turn up as I continue to unpack boxes, but this is so super flat. I can't obviously show you, kind of shows it, but super duper flat, and all thanks to that little acorn pressing pen. Now the instructions say to do two, so I'm just going to keep going with the two pieces I have. I also strongly recommend you starch your fabric. I did not. I starched the stripes. I don't think the top piece is starched though. Again, with these fabrics being cut on the bias, it helps to keep them from stretching. And I'm going to hit this with just a dab of glue. And again, that's mostly because my sewing machine is actually directly behind me. You can't see it in the video, but it sits right here. That's the top of my sewing machine. So I have to spin all the way around in order to be able to sew these. And in the meantime, I'm liable to stop and yell at a kid or something and not have this quite lined up perfectly. And then once I'm done with that one, I actually can do these. Now these are this part of the picture here on the bottom. And so I have to sew these to the sides. And because of this, so then you're going to stack this with these, right? No, this way. Here we go. Oh, that didn't look right. Stack those with these like this so there are no Y seams in this piece. When I was cutting these at my niece's house, I decided I was going to cut the ones that were the biggest pieces and the easiest to cut. I did fussy cut these so that the stripes line up like they do in the picture. And I did that simply by marking right on the acrylic template that I was using where I wanted the stripe to end. You can see this is my acrylic template. Here, I'll hold it over white. And you see my little black marks. That's just Sharpie, which will come off with alcohol or nail polish remover. And that was just my way of marking where the stripe should be. So I'm going to put that one on, and I'm actually going to put the other side on too. Like this to go quickly. That's the point of doing this by machine. I think I'd probably still be threading my needle if I was trying to do this English paper piecing style. And for those of you who are sort of new to our, this is being streamed on our Queen of Diamonds think tank page. And that is just an area where some of us decided to get together and talk about different ways to do this other than English paper piecing. And for those of you who don't know, I do some English paper piecing, and I should honestly do more because I sit in the car a lot at practices for my kids. But for this particular project, it felt very overwhelming. The cutting on this project takes a long time to do well and to fussy cut correctly. And so then the last thing that I could even like think about doing was then trying to sew it by hand. So I decided that I wanted to sew it by machine. And I want to be very clear, because it was made very clear to me, that this is not the way that is endorsed by Pink Door Fabrics, who wrote the pattern, or Tula, or Free Spirit Fabrics, who is distributing the line of fabric. This is just us doing it our way. And nobody's going to help you if you break it, but my argument was nobody's going to help you if you make a mistake English paper piecing it either. So mistakes are what we're good at, and there's tons of extra fabric with this kit to show you what I'm doing again. Oh, I'm on the sewing machine, never mind. There's tons of extra fabric if you make mistakes with this kit. Except for the parts that come later, some of the later kits where you have the faces of the animals and such, I think there's nearly enough fabric in every kit to cut for 2 sets of these. So interesting story about my basement here. It's a half-finished basement in our home in New York. It does have a sump pump, though it is dry, so you may hear that kick on. It has rained here for the last 3 or 4 days. And then last night it snowed, and it wasn't enough snow to really even play in you could still see the grass through it. But the sump pump is what keeps all of my things down here dry. And I'm very nervous for the day the power goes out or it does not work for some reason. My husband's next job when he gets home from his next trip is to install a backup for me. Got my little scissors. I'm new. These are the Karen K. Buckley scissors, and I'm very new to the craze over her scissors, but I gotta be honest, I totally get it. They are just barely serrated on the edges, I believe, which makes them super sharp, and they cut like a dream. And so I bought them in 2 sizes. I was told that the blue pair, which I also have here somewhere, are great because they fit your hand. They're your hand size. This pair I actually bought as a gift, but they fit your hand size. I like these. I love like little scissors. I have a million different pairs of fun little scissors all over my sewing room. So I bought both, and I use these little green ones constantly as I chain piece. And one more, and all of these will be done, and I'll be ready to sew the top on. I know a lot of people who don't use a guide foot when they sew. I still use a guide foot when I do a 1/4 inch seam. So when you do a 3/8 inch seam, which is not one that you learn to eyeball very well, I definitely have to use a guide. Some people can probably line it up with the outside of their foot and just move their needle over. This particular foot I'm using, you can't do that with anyway. But all right, so I'm going to slap some starch on this. Now, I will tell you this comes with, usually you can buy a bottle of the acorn pressing solution for it. I do have that, but I also use Best Press in them. I don't know that it matters so much. I don't know that it matters so much what starch, light starch you use in them. But I would, and you can buy replacement tips for them. And I once asked at a retreat, I'm like, so when do you know when to replace it? But basically, when you open the pen, it's leaking everywhere because the tip has become so smashed that you can't see what I'm doing. I'm pressing these. The tip has become so smashed that it doesn't even hold the liquid in anymore. So I fussy cut these a little different than the picture. Did I fussy cut these? I thought I did. Let's see if I have one that lines up better than the other. I don't. So these are not going to line up perfectly for fussy cutting, which I'm not super worried about. But I've cut mine a little off. I am not super picky about it. I think in all the busyness of this quilt, so as you can see, like my lines are not going to line up. Can you see this? Hold on, let me see. You can't see it well. Okay, so as you can see, my lines are not going to line up perfectly. It's actually even hard for you to see that on the video, but this dark overlaps just slightly here. But I think in the busyness of this quilt, you're never going to see it. And so I'm not worried about it. But you could cut them. It probably has to do with like which side of this black line I lined up. I probably lined up on the outside for one and on the inside for the other. So if you're super neurotic and this really bothers you, you could go back and recut these. You'd have to rip all your stitches out and start over, but you could. I'm not going to. It could also have been a shadow issue because I put the black on the back side, and so as physics would tell us, when that color refracts a little bit through the plastic, it could have distorted where it lined up. Plus, I was doing it on my niece's coffee table, so God only knows. But I'm not going to sweat that. Not that important to me. But it could be to you. I had intentionally done it though, so that like the darks were opposite, whereas in the book it does it where the darks line up. So, and then mine aren't perfect anyway. That could also be why, because it looks like, and maybe this is an optical illusion, but it looks like the darks are a little bit more narrow than the lights. Okay. I'd love to see comments if anyone is out there watching. Feel free to let us know where you're from. Please don't tell me your address, just, city, state. country maybe. If you're watching this later, feel free to drop it in the comments as well. I just wanted to do this to test my equipment for later instructional classes, and then also to force myself to take 2 hours in this new year to sew. When I took this job in New York, it has been very busy. It's very exciting. So on my day job, I am a medical practice administrator, which is basically a fancy way of saying that I run medical offices. And that's sort of cover to cover. I make sure that patients get the support they need, doctors and staff get scheduled and paid, and that the company earns revenue. Lots of different things. Again, I just slapped some glue on that. Anyway, so I started with a company here that is both big locally and growing nationally, and it has been a lot of long hours and late nights. And so we have made the commitment together that in 2024, it's going to be less long hours and late nights. And the way that I get my catharsis is through sewing. So I thought, what better way to kick off the year than to spend the last 2 hours before I put my kids to bed to go back to school tomorrow sewing. All right, so I glued those. Leader. And again, set that setting so it can't go any faster than you're comfortable with when it's on the floor. That way it will never race out of control on you. And I change it all the time. Certain things I can sew very quickly, very comfortably, and certain things I need to go very, very slow. So I'm constantly playing with that knob to adjust it. I'd also love to hear what quilt retreats you're going on this year. Maybe you don't like quilt retreats. I like them to get away. My husband travels for a living. He's a pilot. And I have 2 young children in elementary school. And because I work full-time, I don't get much of a break. So I use quilting retreats as my way to get away. Last year I went on 3. That was a lot to ask of my family. And this coming year I am planning on 2. One in May and one in October. Press really well. Again, I just pressed them, the seam to one side. I try not to press open when I can help it. I've always been told that it weakens the seams. So I try very hard to press to one side unless the pattern calls for an open seam, which sometimes they do. I'm also a quilter. I don't know if you can see that behind me, but that is a long arm behind me with a customer's quilt on it, who I'm very grateful for. She's very patient. Because this move has been hard, and I have a cat, and it's difficult to keep him out of my sewing area. He loves thread, and he loves to chew it and swallow it. So my husband and I worked for about 3 months to figure out how to keep him out. We finally, I think, managed it, though I've learned I have these dividers you can sort of see off to the side here, and if I put a box that's too tall and at the bottom I had to like wrap something around so he couldn't get around the fabric that's in them. And I learned if I put a box that's too tall, he can still get through here at the top. So hard lesson learned this week, but it took several months for me to get comfortable to put a customer's quilt on my machine, simply because I didn't want the cat to use it as a hammock. And the thread, he unthreads it constantly. So most of my customers sew QuiltWorks quilts, and so they're very intricate, and I custom quilt them, so they take a long time to do. And I know how hard they are to sew. And the last thing that I want to do is have my cat destroy a customer's hard work and money. So it's taken a while, but we're there. I also very much enjoy QuiltWorks sewing, and that's what I'm going to Denver and Montana to do, and what all three of my retreats were this last year. So, okay, so this next set is interesting. So I cut these the same way that I just showed you with the add a quarter ruler, except I had an add a 3/8 ruler. So this notch is just a little further, a little wider on an add to 3/8, which again, don't know where they are, moved. But I did this because this was actually the block that they sent to distributors or quilt shops for the test block. So as you can see, my pieces do not have, this is one I didn't cut that way. Let's see if you can see this. This one I didn't cut that way. This one I did with a ruler. So it's just not as clean. They're not these beautiful little corners to line up. Now granted, in most of the applications on this block, the uncut corners will line up too, but that's not always true. So those little corners are really nice, I believe. Yep. So this is this block. Now, this block does dictate for a Y seam. And because of the way this is, this one's actually cut ombre. This particular fabric here is an ombre fabric. So the way that I cut mine was to try to ensure that the colors were consistent. You don't have to do it that way, but I did. And if you didn't do it that way, you could potentially cut this J unit in half. And if you cut that J unit in half, you would not have to sew any Y seams, because you would sew this triangle, this triangle, this triangle, and then you would piece this one to this one to this one, and then all those to that one, or these three across, and then put the top on. But because I left mine whole, I will have a Y to deal with, and the Y is right here. It's right where you can see big Y. And no matter how I piece this together, I have to deal with that Y. So what I'm likely going to do is I'm actually going to do it in diamonds. So I'm going to start with this diamond here. And this diamond is the mirror image on the bottom. And then I'm going to do this diamond with the Y seam and this diamond with the Y seam. And then you can sew these two together, and then the halves together. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to move this so you can see it. And we're going to start with the easy one, which is the top one. So this is where those little corners would have been nice, because this would line up perfectly with the top. Now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to actually cut those corners into it using so I have the template for that now. When we got the demo set from the company, from Free Spirit, we did not have these little guys. So I'm just going to use the template and just cut my dog ears off. I also very much enjoy jaybird quilts, which are lots and lots of hexagons, triangles, diamonds. And I actually have a nifty, if I could find it, a nifty little tool that's about the size of the J unit, about this size, that is meant for cutting corners off of her stuff too. So I'm just going to use this and slice my corners off. I'm going to pull this camera this way just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Sorry about this. Oh, nope, other way. I'm still working with some new camera arms. My camera arms from Florida were not the best, and my ring light that's attached to one of the arms actually broke. So hello, Ginger's watching from Colorado while hand piecing a Tula quilt. Girl, you are my hero. I have started a peacock that I hand pieced, and It's not I think it may have Tula fabrics in it. It was solid, but I also started hand piecing oh my goodness, it's not Passacaglia, but it was another one of those big ones, and I was using Tula fabrics to do it. It's one of the first projects I started. And I do enjoy it, but this one in particular to me felt overwhelming. But welcome and thank you for commenting. And I'll be in Colorado in May. I've been there, I've driven through once, but I'm going to a QuiltWorks retreat with one of their certified instructors in May, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Okay, so this is not the piece I want. This is the piece I want. Okay, so we're just going to do this, and we're going to flip it over. The other thing that I like to do, because I have to spin around so often, is I will glue a few of these together and then spin around and sew a few of them together all at once. It's interesting because the way I cut these, they are not quite perfect. And I'm just cutting these corners off to make my life simpler later. It is definitely possible to do this quilt without the plastic templates. Definitely not easier, but possible. All right. And switch my view here. I am also planning to do a couple other block of the months this year that I'm hosting. And I will do those with some sort of interactive video like Zoom for those who either purchase the kit or the pattern from me or wish to just do the class. And I can show those to you a little bit later on, but they've been shared to my business page. My business is called The Never Enough Thread Works. And it's sort of a running joke in our family that we don't ever want to settle for enough. And the reason for that is because there's always something more, right? So, but it's become sort of a joke because like we buy a motorcycle and it's not quite big enough, so then we trade it for another motorcycle. And we buy, here it is. We buy a boat and it's not quite big enough, so we trade it for another boat. And so then I jokingly told my husband that when we bought our second boat, we bought our first boat during COVID. And when we bought our second boat, I jokingly told him that we were going to name it the Never Enough because he had to have a second boat. And so that is actually the name of the boat. We cut the vinyls for the name out of I have a brother scan and cut. And so we did the vinyls ourselves. And I sort of feel like with my hobby that there's just there's never enough time. I'm learning that the hard way. But there's like never enough projects. I can't get enough of anything. So I always have like 10 or 15 things going on at once. I have embroidery machines behind me, as you can see. I have sewing machines. I have a long arm. Someday I would like to make this a full-time career where I can run my shop and not work for the man anymore. And more of like a hobby that I can share with people. It's never really about the income for me. Or I don't want it to be about that. So anyway, never enough is just simply a reflection of the way that we live our life. And everyone in the quilting community knows you can never have enough fabric, you can never have enough thread, you can never have enough projects. So my company, Never Enough Threadworks, was built that way. And again, it can't just be thread and embroidery and sewing, right? It has to be for everyone in my family. So my husband had taken a liking to thread wrapping fishing poles. It's how you custom make like the colors on fishing poles. So we called it Never Enough Threadwork so that eventually if he could ever do his hobby as to make a living, he could put it under that business name as well, and it would make sense. Okay, we're going to work on these next. So I fussy cut these. They're kind of hard to see. Let me switch this view. I keep forgetting to do this for you guys. So they're lighter on the bottom and darker on the top. So I want to make sure that they stay in that orientation. So I'm just going to set them down, and they need to go onto one of these pieces. I'm going to cheat and cut my corners off. Looks like I used the very edge of a piece of fabric for this one. It's got its own weird corner. Ginger, you also ask, curious to know if you machine sewed block 5-7 with all the tiny I have not gotten, or 5-1, I apologize. I have not gotten to block 5-1. That's what happens when you move. So I may paper piece it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, that's why I think it's helpful for people to know all of these techniques. I have seen it, and I looked at cutting it, and I thought, no way. Too many tiny pieces on a Sunday afternoon on my niece's coffee table. So I did not cut it either. The other interesting thing, so when you get these kits from, you can't see these, but when you get the kits from Free Spirit Fabric, they come in a 3-month bag, and then we split the months up and ship them to our clients. And and then I set mine aside, so I kept one of the sets, and I have no idea what I did with my bag that contains months 4 through 6. It's around here somewhere. It got moved in the move, and I will eventually find it. So at this rate, those are going to be the last 3 months that I do because I can't find the bag. All right, I want to make sure my orientation is right on this, so I'm just going to glue this down. That does not look cut right. I think it has to do with my cutting method when sorry, I'm pulling this closer to me so I can see it. My cutting method when I used the add 3/8 ruler was not perfect. Let's shave that little piece off. Much better. Okay, so there's that. And then this one, once it's sewed, I can put this one on it. All right, and then these two are the same way. They're close to the same gradient. I kind of cut them all from the same section. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. Cut my little, can't quite use the back side of this. I love this little 28mm rotary cutter, but you can't use it backwards. On these templates, they're too thick. Okay. I'm doing this side, so I'll do this side as well. Touch of glue. Going much quicker than I thought. If I get past this, I don't think I'll finish this piece all the way, but if I do, I'm going to have to start cutting fabric. See, these are the, oh no. I have 7, looks like 7-1 cut as well. Okay. Switch, switch. For those of you not familiar with this little table that I use, it's called a So Easy table. And this insert is actually changeable. So I have the insert for this table for my little brother simplicity machine that I use. I use when I take my own machine to retreats. And then I got the insert for the Bernina as well, so I can switch it out. And my little simplicity machine is the one that I used in the videos back in June when I started these. And I love that little guy, but again, I was trying to get comfortable on a Bernina, so he is currently in the utility room. So I try to burn my finger. Perfect. So then fold this over. I want to make sure I got dark side up, dark side up. Also a good reason to use just a dab of glue. The only thing that is not fun when you use this glue, it just goes in the seam allowance. You do not put it past where the seams are going to be. The only downside is if you need to press a seam open, you have to peel it apart and it ends up stretching the fabric real bad. So I would not recommend using it any seams that you know for sure you have to press open. And these I should be fine on. I shouldn't have to. There's a lot of thought that has to go into some of these things. One of the reasons I love quilting is that it's not a lot of decision making for me. I buy a lot of pre-designed kits like this one. Because what's become popularly coined decision fatigue. And I just don't want to decide. I just want a project I can sit down, requires the ability to execute. And I don't have to think much. I say that, there's a lot of thinking in this, but I just want to sit and sew. I met a woman at a retreat who told me that she makes a point to try to sew at least 20 minutes a day. And I love that. I tend to hyperfixate on it, so if I'm going to sew, I want to be able to sew for hours. But I'm wondering if I could do that less if I could make the time every day. So I have had a unique challenge at work that the details of are not important, but I've been struggling with how to address something, and I was working on a QuiltWorks quilt because I'm in a class, and I was doing my homework and yesterday, and all of a sudden the light bulb came on, and I knew exactly the best way to solve the problem, and that would have been Saturday night. And I even messaged the two managers that work for me, and I said, ladies, I have had an epiphany. I have figured it out. We don't have to talk about it. I just needed you to know I fixed it. And all I needed was a little quilting to get my mind right. And I really felt that way. I really felt like I could zone out and I could work on the project and not have to think too much about the project. And as I was doing that, oh, I got lucky on that one. I just realized I did not check for the color. Because I was zoned out working on the project. I was sort of mulling over work challenges in my head, and all of a sudden, I figured it out. All right, and so these go on these like this. Just like that. So right sides together, dab of glue. So I think you should tell me in the comments if you make New Year's resolutions. I was asked that recently. Do you make New Year's resolutions? And I typically do not. I certainly like to have goals, but specifically New Year's resolutions I do not typically make. So something that's going to be important as we sew this together. Sorry for the distraction. It's very hard to see because I used white thread, but we're going to want to be very conscious about where we hit so that we keep our perfect point here. So as we're sewing, we're going to make sure that our needle goes just to the inside of where it crosses there. Can you see that? Yeah, just to the inside of where it crosses right there. And always favor the inside, so always favor toward the seam because you can always sew more this way when you fold it over, but you can't come back. If you've passed the seam, you can't get back. You have to unstitch it. So just something to note. Cindy never makes New Year's resolutions. Good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I used to, I used to tell myself, oh, you're going to lose 20 pounds this year, and you're going to be a better mom, and you're going to read your Bible every day. And I do try to do those things, but I just realized that all I was doing was setting myself up for disappointing myself. So I decided I would skip the official resolution. Again, we're going to sew just to the inside of this. Sorry, my fingers are making that hard to see. Just give me something pointy. Come on. Just to this side of that X, right? That's where we want our needle to hit when we sew it. So we're just going to be very mindful. That should be a 3/8 inch seam. Nobody's perfect, I guarantee you it's not a perfect 3/8 inch seam, but we're going to try. So I'm just going to watch that and be conscious of it as I go. All right. I'm also curious, do you all listen to music when you sew? You have the TV on in the background. Would you like it quiet? I gotta be honest with you, I told my kids to go watch their TVs in their rooms so that you couldn't hear it through the floor. And I'm getting real close to that spot, so I'm just eyeballing. I want to stay just to the inside. And now it's like eerily quiet in my house. It's almost disturbing. But when you have an 8 and a 9-year-old, quiet is always concerning. I did try one day to long arm and watch. I'm a big Buffalo Bills fan, and I tried to watch the game. I was before I moved to Western New York. Tried to watch the game and long arm at the same time, and I realized my blood pressure was too high to try to long arm because that is part of being a Bills fan. So I gave up and went and sat and watched the game. All right. So I slowed down, as you probably saw, at both of those points where we got really, really close. I'm going to show you. This is always the most satisfying part of sewing, in my opinion. If you can fold these bad boys back and your points are perfect. I wish I had my seam roller because it makes it even more beautiful. I'm going to put a little bit of this on there, and I'm going to check it. So always check this before you press it. If it's not right, rip it out and do it again. Oh, look at that. Beautiful point. All right, let me show you. There we go. Perfect. Come on. You can zoom. Perfect little point there. Oh, my camera decided to give up on me because it was zooming. Come on. We're going to do a little of this and a little of that. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Perfect point. If you try to hit the X in the middle, you will end up going too far. It won't fold because you've got to leave room for it to fold over. So, perfect point. Got to leave room for that fabric to fold around the thread. That's the whole craze behind a scant 1/4 inch, which admittedly I've never understood. I know why it is there, but for me, that I probably don't sew a perfect 1/4 inch ever. So I'm always either scant or a little over. As long as you're consistent, that's the main key, but this is where it's super important, and that's when you need perfect points. All right, 2 perfect points. Beautiful. All right, now comes the fun one. Do some Y seams. have to think about this. I always have to like stop in my mind and think about what a Y seam, how a Y seam functions. They aren't hard. They're really not hard in 2023, now 2024, because there's a million YouTube tutorials out there about how to do them. And so sometimes I will just whip out my phone. It's not that I don't know how, it's that I can't, like, I just want to make sure I remember all the steps. So I will whip out my phone and I will look up a tutorial on them if I cannot remember. But we're going to wing it today, see if I can't remember what I taught you in June. Just trimming my corners off, it'll make. It's funny, when I got this sample cut of fabric, I thought I was going to need lots of excess. So it's like this corner right here is the selvage. I can see the little dots from the selvage. But there was tons of fabric left over, clearly. It's funny. One thing that is super helpful for me when I sew a Y seam is to make sure that the bottom piece is like pretty stiff. These are not. So I'm actually going to break a lot of rules with quilting. And I'm going to, these may shrink a little when I do this. I'm going to starch these while I do this other piece. So that they get nice and stiff. Okay. Because those are going to be on the bottom when I do my Y seam. All right. You guys are sitting here watching me struggle to do this, cutting these corners. I have this spinny right here, and I just not using it. Oh, I hear the thunderous footsteps of a child. Let's see what that turns into. All right, let's figure out how I want to do this. So as you can see, I kind of cut these with color in mind. Did I? I cut 3 of them the same and 1 of them different. Way to go, Tabitha. So we're not going to think about color. So what I did, as you can see, is I cut green, green, and it should have been green, green, but I cut these 2 are the same rather than being a mirror image. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. All right. Get rid of these little pieces. All right. So I'm gonna sew these together first. Just fold this back. I'm curious, for those of you watching, is the video quality choppy or is it good? Because on my end it's choppy, but I don't know if that's because I'm trying to stream out. That was my main reason for doing this today, is to test this equipment. And I did a Zoom class the other day. My video was very choppy. All right. But I was with a group of people on video, so I wasn't sure what the reason for it was. All right. We're going to switch this so you can watch me do this. All right. Obviously, this isn't the ideal camera angle if I'm trying to actually show you something intricate on the sewing machine, because you mostly just see my hand. But we're just sewing together today. All right, there's that, and that's the one I glued. So this glue works if you can do this and it doesn't come apart. Then you know you've used the right amount of glue. It's the same glue that you would use to English paper piece. I just don't use it for that. Okay. I'm just pressing these couple of pieces. Whew. Yeah, that got nice and stiff. I just sprayed this with a littleTerial Magic, which I've heard people use for years, and I've never messed with it. It's like paper. Look, it can stand up like on its own. Awesome. It's also all over my ironing board now. um, I don't think it shrunk it too bad either, so. I do a lot of things you're not supposed to do. I never pre-wash my fabrics. Oh, it's perfect. All right, these are also directional and ombre. As you can see, they're a little different colored. I'm actually think I'm going to do them like this, where they're opposite, because they go like that. Okay, so the concept behind this, oh, I got to press these first. Wait a minute. You don't have to put, I put a little more on this than most people would today just because I don't have my seam roller, but it really just takes one swipe of that pen. You push down, liquid comes out. Show you on this camera. You push down, liquid comes out, and then you just swipe. I'm kind of pushing multiple times and swiping extra because I don't have my little seam roll handy. It's funny, she doesn't know this, but hopefully she's on a plane and not watching this. My husband has an aunt who has taken up quilting in the last year. She started a year ago. And her gift for Christmas is appropriately quilting themed. And the first thing my husband asked her husband when he was looking for her gift for Christmas, he got her an Oliso iron. Big, big props on that. But my husband says, does she have a seam roller? Because he knows it's like the first gift I give to everyone. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it was on my last video, and I can link it in the comments. I usually just link to Amazon because unfortunately, I know that's not everyone's favorite, and you should support your local quilt shop every time. But my local quilt shop is a ways away from my new house, and I am a creature of instant gratification, so I just buy it on Amazon. I have someone trying to break into my sewing room. Yes? Okay, stay out, please. Oh boy. New pajamas on. Okay. She wanted to come show me. I'm not sure. Okay. So, sorry, so you can see what I'm doing. That whole idea of this is that this side lines up until we get to the corner here. And then in the exact corner, we stop, drop our needle, we spin it on the machine, we pull this back this way, and we sew the rest of the way. Which means that what I'm going to do, if I'm sewing a 3/8 inch inseam, I'm going to find one of my nifty rulers here, and I'm going to find where 3/8 is. That's a half. I'm going to find where 3/8 is right along that seam. And it's a bit of a triangle, so you have to sort of be careful with this. But you can't see this, I apologize. And I don't have my zoom feature on today, but this is not the best ruler for this either. I recommended everybody get one of these. Let me actually use it. All right, so this little guy I recommended on my last video. It's got a 5/8, a half, a 3/8, and a 1/4 inch little nubby on it, so it's easier to measure and see. So I'm going to find where 3/8 is. I'm going to take this right over. Keep in mind I'm staying straight with this seam, right? But I want to find on this piece of thread that I've already sewn where it touches. And then I'm going to use my favorite thing in the entire world, which is these little friction pens. These iron out. So if you get this hot or you rub it too hard, it is going to come out. And I'm just going to put a mark. This is the back side of the fabric. There's lots of controversy over friction pens, I'm well aware. But that's going to be where I stop, leave my needle, and then take it out and turn it. The other thing that means is that I need to pick my stitches back just to that point. So I'm going to very carefully, and I'm actually not going to use the razor for this one. Where's my little doodad? Of course I don't know where it is. Oh, right here. I'm going to use this little guy, and I'm just going to pick, so there's my purple dot. You can't see it, purple dot. And I'm going to go like one stitch inside of that. It just helps the seam to open up when you try to turn it. I'm just going to pull those first two, it's just 2 or 3 stitches. And I'm going to pull them out so that I can open that when I get there. All right. Let's see if I can do this on the first try. I'm going to switch cameras. Spin. Okay. The other thing that might be helpful here, and I'm only going to use a touch because I do not want this stuck if I need to go back and fix it. It's just a touch of glue. All right, so glue this. Come on, hold still. I cannot explain to you how stiff that fabric on the bottom is, which is awesome. And I managed to do this in the right direction the first time too, because you need to make sure that you can come down your seam and then down your seam. All right. This little guy. All right, this is going to be very hard for you to see. I apologize. We're gonna go down, and this would be where I would normally like slow my machine down, maybe even shorten my stitch length, because I'm coming right for this little purple dot, and careful because this is gonna drag some, but that is right where I'm gonna stop. And I have my needle set to stop in the down position. So then I can lift my foot. I can spin the bottom. So now I've lined up, see if you can see that. So now I've lined up this to sew. And then I'm going to spin the top, sort of push back that way. And line it up so that it will stitch down. The only thing I have to deal with is this piece of seam. So line that up. God, I'm so glad I Tyrrell Magic that bad boy. It is super stiff. It is not stretching. It's wonderful. I would recommend another gadget. I know you guys are going to get so tired of my gadgets. One of those, what do they call them? Purple things. Mine are lots of colors because they came from Amazon, but something that you can stick in here where you should not put your finger, just to get this seam to lay down. You should not put your fingers down here, especially when you have, but this is part of the reason that we pulled that seam open, right? Okay, time for tweezers. Because I am terrified of getting, yeah, so there's maybe a touch of glue on this from where I glued it, which is part of the problem. But we just want to get that to lay down. All right, and then we're going to just sew right down the seam and stop. Cut. Trim that little piece. Switch to this camera. Okay, now, if this worked, we should be able to lay this down. Look at that. Beautiful Y seam. Done. All right, so the only thing I got going on back here, it's a little gnarly, is this seam did not lay down right. So, and that has to do, when I picked that stitch out, I did not pick it far enough so it wouldn't open far enough. I am going to have to restitch just right here because I'm opening this up to peel back the top. There it goes. So I should be able to lay this down flat. There. There we go. There we go. I think this is one of those seams you want to press open. I think that's why. Yeah. So I wouldn't put a touch of glue on it just to make it stay. But then if you press that seam open, sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. You press this seam open, the one that's the bottom of the Y, that will fix the problem that I created with putting glue there. Okay. So I'm just gonna come down here where I've already stitched a little, and I'm gonna back stitch this thing into place. All right, that should fix it. All right, now let's see how much better. All right, so laying nice and flat again. Lots of starch on the seam that you just did. Yep, that's what I did wrong. I did not press that seam open. Oop. Tools everywhere, story of my life. Press that open. I'm like pressing the heck out of this. I just want it so super flat. Beautiful. Okay. One more. So the beauty of this is, let's see, that one goes on this side. So I want to go this way with this one. I'm just looking at the color of the pink part, making sure that I do this the way I talked about. Just put a dab of glue in the corner there. Now, and I'm going to want this seam, I want this seam pressed open. You can't see this because my camera is having a stroke again. There we go. I want this seam pressed open. So I did put a little touch of glue on this, so you can see it sort of stretches a little when you try to pop it open. There it goes. I'm going to press that open real quick. All right, and then again, I'm going to come here. I'm going to take my 3/8 inch side of my little Dritz ruler, and I'm going to follow. It's actually not the thread line I'm looking for anymore. It's actually this fold line. So the spot right where that seam is, that is where I want my needle to stop. And this is the part that I can actually pick open. It's like 3 or 4 stitches. It almost just pulls out because I don't back stitch a lot of times my seams. I need like 1 pop to get it open. You don't want to go past your dot because otherwise you'll end up with a little hole in the middle, and that's what most people hate about Y seams is the little hole in the middle. All right, I'm gonna go. All right. I'm gonna approach that, and keep in mind this is gonna want to pick this up and push it with my little guide here. We're gonna go right for that little dot I made and stop. We're gonna pick up our foot, leave our needle down. We're gonna turn this so it lines up to be sewn here. We're going to flip the top part of this bad boy around. Oh yeah, not leaving that open was my mistake. Gotta make mistakes on camera, right? So you know how to fix them. All right, and now this beautiful Y seam was much easier this time. And done. And clip. And look at that, much better. All right, beautiful. The hard part is done. Now we just have to sew our diamonds together. So, I'm gonna press this, open. I was gonna play music in the background, but I was afraid Facebook would lock me down for using music that wasn't mine, so. All right, so as you can see, when these go in the pattern, dark side, light side, that's what I wanted, so that's how I placed it. All right, and then we take that and we add these. And we're about to have a done block. Now, something interesting, so I cut mine to be blue and green, and in the picture you can see they cut theirs to be red and purple, and that probably had to do with the fact that all of this is red and purple, but again, I'm not going to sweat that. If that would bother you, you should sweat that. Okay, the other thing too we're going to watch as we do this is this seam here, because we're going to want to make sure this is like an intersecting X, or it creates an X when you put it over, and so I'm going to put just a touch of glue on the ends of these just so I can get my points right on the ends, and then we'll talk about how to get that point right in the middle. So, sorry, I pick mine up to do this a lot, which you can't see. Okay, so I put just a touch of glue on each end, and then what I need to figure out is where I have to hit, and I'm going to put a touch of glue at this intersection as well. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to know exactly where I have to hit to get that correct. So what I do is I fold it back, and you look for where the X is perfect, right? And that should be right at 3/8, which is what this little doohickey is for. And sure enough, it is. My seam is a little short here, and like this piece is a little longer. But if you go off of the blue fabric, we're definitely at 3/8. So what I do is I press real hard, just with my finger or my roller if I could find it. And then I actually take, again, I take this little friction pen, and on the side that's going to be sew side up, I find right where that crease is that I made on my thread line, and I make a point. And just like I did for the tips on these pieces, I'm going to aim for just inside that point. And then the other thing I'm going to do so that this doesn't shift up and down, and that stays my perfect point, I'm going to put 2 little dabs of glue. I learned this method doing Quiltworks quilts. They have beautiful lone stars in them. And there's lots of great techniques to get them right. And I didn't think I did any of them very well. So I made up my own. And I make perfect lone stars now using this method. So it may not be what anyone but I have prescribed, but it works for me, and I think that's what's most important. So again, I'm approaching my, you can't see it because it's sort of washed out, but I'm approaching my little dot that I made. I'm going to stay just to the inside of it, like a needle width to the inside. I'm going to finish out my seam, cut, trim, and then say a little prayer that it's a perfect point. Look at that. I wish I could find my seam roller because I could show you that that could be not be more spot on. I usually check before I press, because then if it's not right, I will take it apart and fix it. I definitely have days where they're just close enough, but it is so super satisfying when they're perfect. My stepmom who taught me to quilt will tell you that I will send her pictures of perfect points constantly. So, sure, perfect point. If someone is a quilt show judge and can tell me if that wouldn't pass, I mean, I just don't know how you get that more spot on. That's the method that works for me. So what I just did was the top part goes over on this half. Looks really weird because the way this is, until you sew this point together, it looks wrong. So now we're going to go with the bottom half. Goes like this, and this is the seam we're sewing on. So you can see I did it again here, like you can't see this, hold on, right here. My pink doesn't quite come out as far, so, and that was just a cutting mistake. So I have to kind of figure out which one is the right seam, and honestly, I think it's a little in the middle. A touch of glue on each end, and then we're going to do that same cross method in the middle. If I'm doing a Lone Star, I do that method at every single point. Takes a little longer. Points are always perfect. I went and studied with Judy Niemeyer, who wrote the QuiltWorks method this summer, or excuse me, in October. And I think that was the first time I didn't do it that way, because she's like, you have to trust. It's just going to line up if you did it right. And she was right 96% of the time. And the times that it wasn't perfect, it was definitely my error. So I'm going to fold that back to right where that line gets straight, perfectly straight. See there where my thumbnail is. And I'm going to press, 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 making sure that I don't shift the fabric. I'm just pressing it down like as hard as I can. I'm finding where that crease is on the back side and where it touches my thread line, and I'm marking it so I know what to aim for. And I should have double checked this first, but again, I've got this weird issue here with like this one being too long and this one being too short, and it's literally right in the middle. But yeah, that's a 3/8. So I'm gonna put touch of glue, touch of glue. Another thing, if you don't like taking this lid off and on, if you take a medicine bottle and you put like just a piece of a sponge in the bottom and a little bit of water in it, you can leave it open and put it down into that, and it will not dry out. I do that when I'm like foundation paper piecing. I have to be specific when I'm talking to this crowd, but I do that when I'm foundation paper piecing, because otherwise I'd be opening and closing glue all night long. Okay. This cut job is a little gnarly. Just trying to compensate for it. One stitch to the inside and race to the point. Okay. And clip. All right. See if I did as well on this one, because I got this gnarly issue. This is like one hair off, and it's close enough for me. So I'm gonna put some starch on it. I don't know if you consider best press to be starch, but whatever it is. Put a little bit of that out of my Acorn pressing pen. I have tried some of the other pressing pen brands, Clover, and they work. The flow is a little different, but they work. But I like the acorn the best. All right, so that one is, you can see, just like slightly, I would have gone one stitch this way, right? But it's so minimal, and this quilt is so busy, you're never going to see it. So the last thing to finish this block is, and we need to do that little method we just did 3 times. We have to do here and here and here to make it all perfectly line up. So start with a dab of glue on each end to secure the ends. It's one thing I love about these 3/8 inch seams. Like, almost can't like put the glue where it's not supposed to go. All right. Now these are gonna be a little gnarly because these red pieces in the middle are super stiff. So, but we're gonna do our best. So, and it's the same top or bottom, so you just have to pick which one you're gonna do. Okay, so I'm gonna put this in a position where I can see it. Let's start with that. I'll do the middle first. Okay, so, no, I'm gonna do the sides first. Okay, so we're gonna fold this back to where that X is. And this can help too. You need a pin with a thin, come on, pin with a thin head on it. But if you don't want this to slip, you can just pin it this way and you can still fold it over. I'm gonna fold this back to just where they cross, right? And we're gonna push down and then we're gonna measure and make sure that that's 3/8 and it's a little small. So what that means is I need to shift this. I think I have this the right way in the first place. I need to shift this just a little. And that a lot of times is just largely due to the bias issue. If things stretch a little. So we're going to do that again, right where it's perfect, and push, push, and push. You could even press this. I don't like to use an iron on my cutting mat, and you definitely need a stiff surface underneath it to press it. So, and that just messed that up. I should have pinned that first. Let's try that one more time. I'm just pinning it in the inseam so that it can't do what it just did and pick up and slide. And I will have to move that pin if this is not at 3/8. Okay. Just using the butt end of this glue pen to like really press that so I can find it on the back. Check for 3/8. Still just a hair narrow. Pin it back down. This is just me being a perfectionist, y'all. Like, I just want this point to sit perfectly. Oh, that's better. I can already tell. And put my point in there. And put my little dab of glue. My glue has to go where my pin is, so I gotta pull that out. And notice you can't see pressure, obviously, but I'm holding this down with a ton of pressure just so that it doesn't slide, like using my short little nail almost like a stiletto. Okay. So my company before it was the Never Enough Threadworks was Stitches and Stilettos. And when I named it that, I actually did not realize that there was a quilting tool called a stiletto. I have had more than have, but I had a obsession with shoes that went away when I had kids and can't chase children in high-heeled shoes. So I ran a management company business for years called Stiletto Management Consulting, and I just brought that name with me when I formed my quilting company name. And I'm doing this the hard way. Then I learned that there's actually a quilting supply called a stiletto. All right, so 2 are done. I realized why this is so difficult. I can fold them back from here instead of going the other way. And these are not wanting to line up real well. So I'm going to check my seam. Seam is a little long. There we go. And glue, 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 glue. I'm right where I creased that. All right, okay. So when I sew this together, I have to cross just inside this one, just inside this one, just inside this one, and we should come out with 3 perfect points. All right. Ooh, that wants to go to the outside, so we'll see if that was too much of a pull. This one definitely feels small on the seam. I'm going to kind of straighten that out. Hopefully we didn't distort that too bad. Okay. All right, let's see what we got. Well, that one came out perfect. That one's very close. A little to the inside on that one. My last one was a little to the outside. So that's the nice thing about this. So see how this is. You can't see this. I mean, it is just a hair under. You could add another stitch if you really wanted it to just inside of that, and it'll actually push it over. I'm not gonna. I might. We'll see. That's why you always, and this one's the same way. That's why you always favor the inside of the dot. So if I just came 1 stitch outside of this dot, it'll fix that. And same for here. 1 stitch this way will fix that. So I'm actually going to do that just because they're both that way. And I just do it by lining up the line, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 stitches back from, and just restitching. And as long as your stitches stay just to the outside of where you were. The outside for me meaning the left here. Lock my stitch. Then you should be fine. All right, I'm going to clip that. I use Aurifil 50 weight to do most of my piecing. So that is what I'm using here. The weight of your thread will affect how this works. Just went one stitch to the outside of that dot, come past it, back stitch a couple stitches to lock in my stitching, and we're done. Now, if I had sewn to the left of those dots originally, I would have to unstitch it to go back, and this one in the middle is already perfect, so I didn't mess with that. But to fix this, oh, so much better. I just went one stitch to the left, and as you can see, now when it's pressed, my point will be perfect. And same on this end, one stitch to the left, and pressed, my point will be perfect. So we're just going to press that, and then we are done with this block. And then I'm going to take just a minute to show you guys the block of the month project. I haven't decided exactly when I'm going to start yet. I think I'm going to start in March for the first one, and then probably May or probably June for the second one. They're very similar. I fell in love with them through the fabric distributor. They are not Tula, though I'm thinking about making a Tula mod kit for them. So like you can just buy the pattern and then buy Tula fabric that I can kit up for them as well. That way I can actually do my sample quilt in the manufacturer fabrics, and I will do my quilt along quilt in Tula, because I know we all love Tula. And I have lots of her basics line or solids, or I have solids and basics. All right, that's it. It is done. Block 5, nope, 2-1. Block 2-1 is finished. So the blocks I have finished for this now are 3-2, 2-1, and 2 versions of 1-1. Beautiful. All right, I'm going to hop up real quick and grab these sample patterns off the shelf. Oh, I don't know where that one is. I swear to you, running a business with your house still in boxes is most definitely an adventure. All right. All right, so I believe this is the first one that I'm doing. Yeah, this is the first one I'm doing. So I'll be doing this, of course. I'll be doing this, and like I said, I'm thinking about, this is not Tula fabric. I'm thinking about creating a colorway with some Tula fabric that you could also sell. And I'm going to sell it 2 ways. I'll sell it as yardage, and then I will also sell it as pre-cut pieces. So you can actually get, so you can actually just sit and sew it. And that will be coming, that will be coming, I believe, in March. There's one very similar to this. My cameras have decided that we're done for the night. There will be one very similar to this in more blues and grays that we'll be doing later in the year as well. Also a block of the month. You can buy one time as yardage, monthly as yardage, or monthly as full pre-cuts. All right. Well, I think it's not quite 8 o'clock, but I think that's enough for one day. I really appreciate those of you who hung with me or who are watching this video on replay. Thank you for helping me test my equipment and just hanging out tonight. And we'll definitely be doing this more often, and I will be finding an interactive forum for those who want to stream as well or to log in and just talk and chat. But I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll leave some links to products in the comments. And I look forward to next time. Have a very happy new year. Welcome to 2024.